It was February 24th, 1942, just 79 days after Pearl Harbor. America was still bleeding, still terrified of what might come next. The West Coast lived in fear of Japanese bombers, of submarines lurking off the coast, of an invasion that could strike at any moment. The blackout curtains were drawn, searchlights waited in silence, and anti-aircraft guns stood ready in the hills above Los Angeles. That night, at 2:15 a.m., the silence broke. Radar operators picked up something, unidentified objects moving slowly toward the California coastline. They couldn't tell what it was. Enemy bombers? A reconnaissance plane? The order went out. Prepare for attack. Air raid sirens screamed across the city. Thousands jolted awake, pouring into the streets in their nightclothes, staring at the sky with fear and anticipation. Families huddled in basements. Soldiers rushed to their posts. The city of angels went dark, wrapped in the heavy silence of expectation. And then, the searchlights snapped on. Dozens of beams cut across the black sky, converging on a single glowing shape high above the city. It hovered, pale against the darkness, caught in a web of blinding light. Witnesses swore it wasn't a plane. It wasn't moving like one. It glided, slow and deliberate, indifferent to the chaos below. At 3:16 a.m., the guns opened fire. Anti-aircraft batteries thundered, shaking the ground. Shells arced into the sky, exploding around the object. For 5 long minutes, then 10, then 20, the sky above Los Angeles was filled with smoke, fire, and the roar of artillery. Civilians covered their ears, children screamed, windows shattered across the city from the concussions. And yet, the object remained. Witnesses described it as large, disc-shaped, glowing faintly. Some said it was silver. Others said it looked like a giant balloon, lit from within. Searchlights clung to it as it drifted silently over Culver City and Santa Monica, immune to the storm of fire around it. The barrage continued for nearly an hour. 400 shells were fired into the night sky. Shrapnel rained down on neighborhoods, smashing cars, tearing through roofs, injuring dozens of civilians. At least 5 people died, some from heart attacks brought on by the panic, others from falling debris. But the target? It never fell. It never even wavered. As dawn approached, the guns fell silent. The object drifted southward, vanishing into the early morning haze. The city was left in stunned silence, its streets littered with twisted metal and shattered glass. In the aftermath, questions erupted. Military officials at first claimed it had been enemy aircraft, proof that Japan had struck again. But no wreckage was found. No planes were shot down. No bombs had fallen. Nothing remained in the sky but smoke. Later, the government changed its story. They said it was a weather balloon, a simple mistake, a jittery military firing blindly into the night. But the witnesses, the thousands who had seen the glowing object drift above their homes, didn't believe it, because they knew what they had seen. And the photos, captured by the Los Angeles Times, told another story. A strange, luminous craft caught in the glare of searchlights, surrounded by explosions, untouchable. That night would be remembered forever as the Battle of Los Angeles. Not a battle against men or planes or bombs, but against something far stranger. And in the shadows of the Pacific War, a darker question began to spread. What exactly had come to Los Angeles that night? An enemy weapon? A mass hallucination? Or something not of this world at all? The official records are contradictory, full of redactions and contradictions. But the people of Los Angeles never forgot the night their skies lit up with fire, and a silent intruder drifted above them, untouchable. and the truth of what it was may still be hidden in the vaults of military secrecy. When dawn broke on February 25th, 1942, Los Angeles was a city in ruins, not from bombs, but from its own guns. Streets were littered with twisted shrapnel, windows shattered, rooftops pocked with holes. Civilians wandered in shock, staring at the damage. The acrid smell of smoke still hung heavy in the morning air. And everywhere, the same question lingered. What had they been firing at? Newspapers rushed to print. The Los Angeles Times published photographs that seemed almost surreal. Beams of searchlights converging on a glowing object in the sky, bursts of artillery surrounding it. The images spread across the nation, fueling panic and disbelief. The headlines screamed of enemy raid on Los Angeles, though no enemy debris was ever found. The toll was grim. At least 5 people were dead. Some were crushed by falling shrapnel. Others suffered fatal heart attacks in the chaos. Dozens more were injured, and property damage was extensive. But the true wound was psychological. If this was enemy action, how had they escaped untouched? And if it wasn't, then what had the military unleashed hell upon? The explanations began immediately, and they conflicted at every turn. The Navy declared the whole incident a false alarm. No planes had been sighted, they insisted. The guns had fired at shadows and nerves, but the Army disagreed. Their radar operators had seen something. Their gunners had tracked it. And thousands of civilians swore they had witnessed a craft drifting silently above the city. President Roosevelt himself was briefed. Military leaders worried about public confidence. Was America so vulnerable that unknown objects could glide over its largest West Coast city without resistance? Or worse, had the military revealed its own weakness by firing blindly into the night sky, leaving death and destruction behind? Behind closed doors, paranoia bloomed. Some officials whispered of Japanese reconnaissance craft, massive balloons launched from submarines offshore. Others argued the objects were too large, too controlled. And then there were the rumors, spreading quietly through the ranks. What if it wasn't Japanese at all? Among the civilians, those rumors grew louder. Witnesses described a silvery, disc-shaped object. Some claimed there were multiple craft moving in formation. Others said the main object was immense, glowing faintly, seemingly impervious to the barrage. One man told reporters it was as big as a dirigible, but with no sound, no propellers, no wings. And then there was the photograph. The Los Angeles Times image became an icon. A glowing oval shape suspended in the sky, locked in a cage of searchlights, explosions bursting around it. To some, it was proof of an alien craft. To others, a trick of light and film exposure. But for decades, the photo would be dissected, enhanced, debated, yet never fully explained. In the official record, the incident became a tangle of contradictions. The Army claimed enemy planes had been sighted. The Navy insisted there were none. Civil defense authorities blamed jittery nerves, yet none could explain why radar showed unidentified targets, or why eyewitnesses described something far beyond any known aircraft. For the people of Los Angeles, explanations mattered little. They remembered the fear, the thunder of anti-aircraft fire, the eerie image of a glowing object refusing to fall. To them, the truth was obvious. Something had come to their skies that night, and it was beyond human understanding. Over the following days, the government struggled to regain control of the narrative. The Secretary of the Navy downplayed the incident, calling it a case of nerves. Editorials mocked the chaos, yet the damage was done. Trust had been shaken. Even Japanese officials, when asked after the war, denied any involvement. No records of flights, no submarines launching balloons, no missions of any kind. Whatever had appeared over Los Angeles, it was not theirs. The Battle of Los Angeles faded from the headlines, replaced by the ongoing war in the Pacific. But for those who lived through it, the memory never faded. The booming guns, the raining shrapnel, the strange object drifting slowly across the night sky. It remained etched into their minds. And as the war dragged on, the questions lingered. If it wasn't Japanese planes, if it wasn't a balloon, then what had the people of Los Angeles witnessed? The official line, false alarm, rang hollow. The photographs said otherwise. The testimonies of thousands said otherwise. And in the shadows of war, a chilling possibility began to grow. Perhaps Los Angeles had not been attacked by men at all. Perhaps on that February night, the city had fired on something humanity was never meant to fight. After the war ended, the United States turned its gaze backward. The chaos of Pearl Harbor had faded. The Japanese Empire lay in ruins, and the archives of the Pacific War were opened. But in those files, there was no mention of a raid on Los Angeles in February 1942. No Japanese bombers, no reconnaissance balloons, nothing. And that absence spoke louder than any official denial. By the late 1940s, the nation was entering the atomic age. The Cold War began to simmer, and in the skies, strange lights were being reported with growing frequency. Newspapers filled with stories of flying discs, mystery craft, and strange visitors. The Battle of Los Angeles, once dismissed as a wartime panic, suddenly found new life. People began to ask, had America's first true UFO encounter happened not in Roswell, but years earlier, over the streets of Los Angeles? The photograph returned, scrutinized again and again. Now, in the context of flying saucers, the glowing object captured in the searchlights seemed undeniable. To many, it was not a balloon, not a trick of exposure, but proof. A craft of unknown origin, impervious to artillery fire. The U.S. military, however, kept its story tight. Reports trickled out, contradictory as ever. Some claimed radar had tracked dozens of unidentified craft that night. Others said there was nothing but weather interference. Official investigations buried the matter in technical jargon, reassuring the public while leaving the core mystery unsolved. Then came Project Blue Book. In the 1950s and 60s, the U.S. Air Force formally investigated UFO sightings across the country. Thousands of reports, hundreds of cases, and when researchers looked back, the Battle of Los Angeles stood out like a scar. It had everything: military witnesses, radar tracks, physical damage, civilian casualties, and photographic evidence. And yet, Project Blue Book offered little. In its files, the event was reduced to war nerves and possible weather balloons. A convenient explanation. Too convenient. Even some of the investigators privately admitted the case didn't add up. Meanwhile, witnesses continued to speak out. Veterans who had manned the guns that night swore they had fired at a real target, something massive that simply refused to fall. One recalled, decades later, "It wasn't Japanese. I don't know what it was, but it was there. We all saw it." Civilian testimonies poured in too. Ordinary men and women who had seen the craft drift silently over the rooftops, bathed in the glow of searchlights. They remembered its size, its shape, the eerie stillness with which it moved. To them, there was no doubt. It was not human technology. By the 1970s, the Battle of Los Angeles had become more than a wartime footnote. It was a cornerstone of UFO lore, a moment when humanity fought the sky itself. Documentaries, books, and researchers pointed to it as the first major UFO incident on American soil. Roswell might have been the crash, but Los Angeles was the battle. And the strangest part? It was all in plain sight. The photos, the witnesses, the deaths, the chaos. It had been splashed across newspapers, broadcast to millions, then quietly buried under the weight of official denials. But secrets don't stay buried forever, and the deeper ufologists dug, the darker the implications became. If the craft over Los Angeles wasn't Japanese, and it wasn't American, then what was it? And if our guns couldn't bring it down, what exactly was watching from above? 80 years have passed since the night Los Angeles fired on the sky. The scars of that barrage are gone. Windows replaced, streets rebuilt. But the questions remain, heavier than the shrapnel that once rained across the city. The official line still insists it was a false alarm, war nerves, a weather balloon perhaps, nothing more. Convenient words, easy to print in a headline, but they do not silence the photographs. They do not erase the testimonies of thousands. They do not explain why radar tracked unidentified objects drifting toward the coast, or why the guns roared for nearly an hour against something that refused to fall. The theories are many. Some argue it was a secret U.S. test, an experimental craft mistaken for an enemy raid. Others claim the government knew what it was all along, but concealed it to avoid mass panic in the early, fragile days of war. And then there are those who believe the simplest and darkest explanation, that it was not of this world. That on that night, Los Angeles became the first battlefield in a silent war, one not fought between nations but between species. The evidence is compelling, but never conclusive. A photograph too blurry, a witness too shaken, a document too heavily redacted. The truth dangles just out of reach, like the glowing craft itself, suspended in the searchlights above the city. But maybe the truth is not about what the object was. Maybe it is about what the event revealed. Humanity's fear of the unknown, our readiness to unleash destruction on shadows, our inability to admit vulnerability. The Battle of Los Angeles is remembered not for what fell, because nothing did, but for what we fired into the sky. 400 shells, thousands of searchlights, and in the desperation of a city caught between paranoia and revelation. Some call it hysteria. Others call it proof. Perhaps it was both. A mirror held to humanity in a moment of terror, showing us not what was above us, but what was inside us. And yet, the question lingers. If it truly was nothing, why are the files still redacted? Why are the explanations still contradictory? Why do officials still dismiss the event with a nervous smile, as if hiding something just beyond the edge of the record? On that night in 1942, the people of Los Angeles looked to the heavens and saw something that should not have been there. They fired with everything they had, and it did not fall. The truth may never come down, but perhaps the lesson is clear enough. The sky is not empty. It never was.